What's going on, guys? Today I have a repricing video for you. Whether you're an experienced seller or a new seller selling in Canada, I have Dillon, co-founder of Go Aura Repricing. He has all the data. He's here to share all the tips and tricks for us Canadians that are not covered here on YouTube. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into this 1 hour and 30 minutes of pure gold. What's going on, everybody? My name is Anthony Mancini, and today we have a podcast interview, whatever you want to call it. It's not something that's every single week, but when I have a special guest I want to interview, I want to bring them onto the channel. And today I have Dillon Carter, co-founder and COO of Go Aura Repricing, which is a repricer that for me, I was made about aware of it 2-3 years ago. It's piqued my interest and I couldn't help myself. I reached out. Please give us a little intro on yourself. I know you've sold on Amazon before, but give my audience like a full get to know you type of thing.
I'm Dillon, one of the co-founders here. I've spent a third of my life in the Amazon selling space, either as a seller or on the software side. So I've been through a lot of cycles. I've seen it all at this point. And I got started like most of us do. You hear about Amazon, you're like, okay, that sounds a little too cool. Let me go buy a few things at Target, Walmart, whatever. Send it in and figure it out. And then you do that, something sells, you see there's a profit margin there. You go, okay, let's take this seriously now. So I got started with RA 12, 13 years ago. Decided to go back to college full-time. I had taken 4 years off. I was a personal trainer full-time at the time and lost all my time, right? So I'm getting my finance degree in person intentionally. And I had to make a strong decision. RA was not going to cut it time-wise. I couldn't pull it off. OA back then was a thing, but not how it is done today. There was way less software. It was way more difficult. So I went wholesale. So back then, wholesale was not nearly as common and approachable as it is today. There was maybe one course on it, a lot of myths related to it. But I dove headfirst into it, pulled it off, started to grow that. Met my now co-founder, James, also doing wholesale at a higher level than I was DMing everyone on Instagram who seemingly had a larger business than I did. And he was the first one to say, hey, I'd love to, pick your brain and talk once a week and share insights. And come to find out he was a computer science major at the time. So he was already building software for his business. And he's like, hey, do you want to, kind of partner up on this thing? I was like, yeah, sounds awesome. Love tech, right? So we launched VenDriveCRM.com, still around. We don't really do much with it. We learned everything not to do with software. So we took all those lessons and said, okay, well, what would we build knowing what we're capable of now that would meaningfully have an impact based on our experience? And we landed on repricing. I've used a lot of the tools that already exist, that still exist. And there was a lot of issues we noticed. One, on the support side, anytime you have questions, it's going into a black box. It takes forever. It's hard to get somebody to read between the lines to understand what we're actually saying, or you get massive paragraphs and you're like, I don't have that time to parse through all of this. So we knew already there's a few pillars. The first pillar was that customer success part. We've never outsourced support. It's all in-house. You're going to talk with Casey. You're going to talk with Finn. You're going to talk with me. We wanted an environment and a culture that allowed sellers to get real answers to real questions. And then number two, it was overwhelming when you first get your repricing software set up. The first time I did it, I put it off for years. I was so afraid of messing everything up because it very much feels like, here's all the things you can do. Go do whatever you want. Well, I don't know what I want to do because I'm new and I have no idea. So we wanted to lean more so into education. Here's how to do it. And that's kind of the stuff we'll talk about here today, because how you think about it really matters and can change the decisions you make. So there's all these settings everywhere, right? And you're like, I don't know what makes sense. So it was overwhelming. So we wanted to design the software itself in a way that was intuitive. It made sense. It didn't just throw everything in your face and you have no idea what the heck you're looking at and you can't find what's important, right? When you're busy as a seller, you need a software where you can log in, see exactly the things that matter, drill deeper if you need to, and take the actions you need to and move on with your life. And ideally automate a lot of that stuff as well. So for us, when we landed on that concept, we spent 8-9 months building out the beta. We launched it, had 25 users overnight, and then immediately started to scale up ever since then. And obviously it's evolved and changed over the years. A year or two ago, we launched the 1.0 version. So we literally rebuilt all of Aura from the ground up. We changed so much from the original version of it because we had learned so much. The marketplaces were evolving, the needs of sellers were evolving. There's a lot of focus on AI and stuff like that. And that's really what we've been doing. So yeah, I've seen a lot. I've kind of poked holes in the myths on how you do wholesale. I've poked holes in how repricing works because turns out when you run a repricing company, you tend to learn a lot versus what everybody just assumes is true. And I'm like, actually, not really correct anymore. I also believed that until I saw the data. And so now, we support tons of users. We continue to grow, and we're just well known for having a intuitive, high performing, amazingly supported software.
Man, so much to unpack there. What gets me excited when I hear your story is, there's a couple different repricers out there, right? There's a ton, but like the ones that stick, right?
Yeah.
It's rare, at least in terms of my research, that you find a founder that was so involved in the Amazon space, right? Because it's easy to make content on Amazon and say, hey, our repricer, and slap a nice AI buzzword on top of it and be like, yeah, we got AI repricing, everything's going to do it. In reality, it's just like a bunch of rule sets in the back end, and it's not actually AI. And again, understanding like all the strategy, and we'll talk about it, but all the strategies that come into repricing, being someone like that's at the head, right, and making those impactful decisions on your repricer, it's like you must have the experience for Amazon. And that's where I think there's a lot of disconnect from some types of repricers out there that's like they don't know what it is to be sellers. They don't understand our reality. And I'm going to take it a step further and say why I'm excited to have you here is because like I'm a Canadian Amazon seller, right? I post these videos. Most of the viewers today are going to be Canadian sellers. And the reality is there's like nobody to serve us online, right? There's a few of us out there.
It's very interesting.
That data, right? Like you mentioned the word data, and that's one of my favorite words. Like people I teach, like I love it, right? So there's at the base, what people think works in terms of repricing, but then that's like based off of all the generic American advice. But then you can go down a level deeper, and you start going like, okay, nobody talks about the right repricing strategies in general. And then when you add on the Canadian layer to it, you're like, that is so confusing for new sellers. Now, I won't necessarily go into a deep dive yet on Canada. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Let's talk about the general umbrella of repricing, because like someone that's coming into Amazon, right? They're relatively new. They're like, repricer. Why would I need a repricer, right? Like I have 20 ASINs right now. I'm able to reprice this fine. Can you give me just a quick elevator pitch before we go deep dive into what is repricing? Like, why is it important?
Yes. So what is this random term called repricing? Because it doesn't exist really anywhere else outside of a verb of I reprice this thing, and that's rarely used. The thing you want to keep in mind, a lot of sellers don't realize how quickly things change on Amazon. Mainly because you're looking at three different systems in a lot of ways. So, what you're seeing in Seller Central, your price, that's one set of data and one, location. What is public on, Amazon.ca, Amazon.com. Like it's supposed to be the same, but they're different systems, so they speak to one another. So they can be slightly out of date. And when you're on an actual listing on .ca, that page is going to be cached. And what caching does when you're building software, especially front facing, if you want it to be faster, you cache things. And all cache means is you kind of store a lot of stuff locally to the browser. That's why you have things like cookies and stuff like that. So it's stored in your actual browser. And it allows it so that when you hit refresh every single time, it's not actually pulling fresh data, which sounds wrong, right? It's like, well, of course I want fresh data. Well, when you're operating at Amazon scale, the cost of doing that is insane. The speed would be horrendous. And so even though you're refreshing the page, you're not actually seeing the latest and greatest. So even as a seller, you're not seeing how fast things are happening because I'm using the API. I get to kind of peek behind the curtains and see every time something happens. And sellers don't realize, oh, in the last 3 minutes, you never saw this happen because it happened so fast. Everybody updated their prices 20 times. You never notice it. You just saw the most recent one that happened. So, but for a consumer who landed on that page for the first time, it does not have a cache. When you first go to a web page, it is going to be the freshest data. So when I hear, especially newer sellers, well, I can just go in once a day and just hit match, 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 match. Sure, of course you can do that. However, within 30 seconds, on average, your price is now out of date. So how many sales are you missing? Simply because you're not matching fast enough. Now, matching is only one aspect of repricing, right? The goal of repricing fundamentally is twofold. It is to either increase sales velocity, so I'm selling faster, which usually means being in the buy box more, or number two, increasing my profit margin, so make me more money. We're kind of on the more protective side, right? You can't do both at the same time. They usually oppose one another. This is where a lot of new sellers get confused. They're like, cool, Dillon, get me 20% more sales and 40% more ROI at the same time. Well, we got to have a conversation here. And we can talk about how to structure your repricing software so that you balance that out incredibly well, because there is a time to focus on one versus the other. That's very important. So instead of you going in once a day, once an hour, why not have a computer? Why not have software do this for you real time? You will never, listen, I type very fast. I could never keep up, right? And at 20 SKUs, it doesn't feel like a big deal. At 50, it starts to. At 100, it's insane. At 200, there's no possible way. And I've heard people be like, well, I have my VA do that. Why are you paying a human? Even though VAs are cheaper than your time, they're still dramatically more expensive than paying pennies per hour for that same output that it would also be better and faster.
It's running 24/7.
24/7. I mean, let me put this into context for you. In the last 30 days, Aura specifically has updated a little under 800 million prices. 800 million just in the last 30 days. Hopefully that puts it into perspective. You can't keep up as a human. No human can. It's physically impossible. So there are also these brief moments where you can raise your price and get sales above the buy box. But if you're not watching it every single second and seeing the data that developers get access to, by the way, that you don't as a seller, you can't take advantage of those moments. So in a lot of cases, when we take somebody who's not using repricing software, we put them onto it, we set it up correctly, we see anywhere from 40 to 60% increase in sales. It depends certainly on where they're at. There's a big range there. Most of the time, though, it is night and day. And a lot of sellers, too, don't realize there's kind of two ends of the spectrum you're trying to avoid. There is being overly aggressive, which means you're winning all the buy boxes and you're selling super fast, but you're not really making much on your margin, right? Margin's way too low from where basically it should be. The inverse of that is the buy and hold kind of mentality. You know, if you've sold on eBay, you're kind of used to that model. You apply it to Amazon, and then you're not being as aggressive as you should be on your price. So your ROI, your profit margin, whatever, looks healthy. However, you're leaving cash tied up inside of FBA and stuff like that. And so now you have a cash flow problem, right? Amazon's a volume game. It's a churn game. It is how fast can I deploy my capital, get a healthy return back, and redeploy it again. A lot of sellers get caught in this trap where they deploy tons of their cash into inventory, and then it sits for 3 months, and then they're twiddling their thumbs, and opportunities are passing them by because they don't have the capital to redeploy. So what we try to do in repricing is we try to say, okay, you might be at this end of the spectrum, you might be at this end of the spectrum. What we really want to do is rebalance you so that you're getting the best of both worlds. And when we do that, a lot can change. So why do you need one? You can't keep up, and things move way too fast. And two, you're literally missing out on sales and better profit margins by doing it yourself.
100%. I suggest every new seller coming and asking me questions, the minute you start, okay, it's subjective to when is the perfect time, right? We're building a business here, right? Or you want to build a side hustle, you want to build a business. A business comes with those expenses that are logical in the long term. So your first month or two, okay, will you gain a positive ROI from subscribing to Aura? Maybe not. But it's the first month or two is not what's important. It's the fact that you're using it, you're learning the tool. By the time you have 50, 75, 100 ASINs, you're comfortable with the tool. And this is where actually it segues perfectly, because what I've loved about seeing from the outside Aura is that it has this tiered based subscription, right? If you're more of a new seller, right, and your volume is not necessarily there, and you want to be able to take advantage of everything that Aura is unique with all its AI capabilities, right? Well, the other one, like the other services, they might have to pay, yeah, they might be able to pay $50, but not going to have access to AI based, right? It's all going to be rule based, which means match the buy box.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned, right, all the tech that comes in, and I'll have your moment to be able to really deep dive on it. But
Yeah.
we've learned that matching the buy box is not always necessarily the right answer, right?
Yeah.
Everyone talks about 30% ROI. That's like the magic number in
Right.
this space. I don't know what made us invent 30% ROI is the magic number, right?
Yep.
There's ASINs at 20%. If the volume is there, is going to be much better than the ASIN at 50% if the volume is not. So the
Right.
fact that now there's a repricer out there that is conscious of this, right?
Yeah.
And is helping you find that middle ground of volume and profit, and the ability now to, when you start as a new seller, to be able to get these services. And can you let me know? I believe it starts at 50 US per month?
47 US. Yeah. So
47 US.
we do pricing very differently than a lot of others. We've never wanted to be the cheapest, to your point, because what that really means is you're being penalized for being a smaller seller. Again, I've been a seller. My co-founder's been a seller. So why would I penalize you for being a new seller? Like that's the last thing you need. You're already drinking from a fire hose. It's already a lot to deal with. We're not going to add on to it. So for us, we also don't want to be the most expensive because now you don't have access to all the cool stuff. We're not going to gate all that stuff. So what we did was we said, okay, we're going to break down our pricing tiers based on your revenue, not based on the number of listings. Listings do not correlate to revenue. So like when you see all these listing caps, and sometimes it can make sense on like the super high end, just from our cost perspective, but generally speaking, it doesn't work in the same way. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at the average of the last 2 months of your revenue. And then that will dictate what plan you should be in. And then no matter what plan you're in, you have access to all the same features and functionality. So we're not saying, hey, you're not paying us enough for AI. That was a thing for the longest time. And we're like, no, that makes no sense. Why can't you, as a new seller, compete at the same level with a seller doing 10 times your revenue, strictly from a software perspective? The only reason why that happens is because somebody decided you couldn't. Well, we can just as easily decide you can. So that's what we did. So yeah, our starter plan comes in at $47 per month. You can do annual 20% off, that kind of thing. But you still have access to unlimited listings. You have access to Maven that goes up to 15K a month in sales. So you got plenty of space there. It used to be time bound. So it was the first year. Now we're like, no, just stay on it. I mean, I get it. 2025 was weird. We all know. It might take you some time. That's cool. Right. But we're not outlandish even at the higher tiers. Even our pro tier, which is like super unlimited. So like each tier has limitations on certain things just because it does cost us more, right? So we try to do it in such a way that those limits don't really hinder you at whatever level you're at, right? So it's not really like, well, I can't use it because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you can't. Like you're not going to feel uncomfortable with our plans. And so yeah, we wanted to take a very different approach because again, if you charge too little, you can't hire amazing people. We don't outsource anything here. We don't have VAs or we don't have a development team overseas. We don't do none of that. We do everything in-house. We don't hire programmers. We have an actual software engineer. And yes, there's a very big difference. A lot of non-technical people use those terms interchangeably. In tech, they are not interchangeable. A programmer can write code. And yes, that's important. Writing the code's not the most important part. That's actually the most straightforward part. The engineering side is designing the system, the architecture for the back end, how to make things performant, all these different things. It's more intellectual than it is just write the code because you need to know how to write the code in a way that makes sense. So we take a very different approach there. Again, our support team, everything in-house. So if we charge too little, we couldn't afford that because we pay our people incredibly well. If we charge too much, again, now we're just saying, well, you have to wait until you've earned the right and proven yourself to have access to this kind of tech. I don't love that approach personally. I would be upset if I decided to become a seller again and couldn't get access to the latest and greatest because I was new again. So yeah, we just take a very different approach. So we're also very, it used to be if you wanted access to like AI and that kind of stuff, you basically had to spend a minimum of $100 a month. In a lot of cases, it was way more, multiples of that. $47 a month, you get instant repricing. We're not delaying, right? So instant repricing, AI, all the bells and whistles, all the same things that somebody who's doing 4 million a month on our platform gets access to, you get access to. And we personally onboard everyone. So we don't do this whole jump in, hey, figure it out yourself. Good luck. No, no, no. We have plenty of support documentation. So we're not in your way if you know what you're doing. If you're like, I'm getting started for the first time, I don't know what to do. Awesome. Casey on our team does our onboarding sessions. They're one-on-one, takes about 20, 25 minutes. It's going to ask you some questions, make sure he understands where you're coming from, what you're trying to achieve. And we build all the strategies and workflows, which we can talk about in your account with you. So when you leave, you don't have a bunch of notes that now I have to go remember and implement. No, you're up and running and repricing at the end of that call.
As someone who's teaching the Canadian community, because there was nobody really doing it, I struggled because for me in my business, I won't name them, but I was using a repricer that, was considered the creme de la creme, right?
Yeah.
That would get you sales over the Bible, essentially telling everything that you just mentioned. And the thing though is, as a Canadian, that would cost me 500 US, which would be close to like 700 Canadian per month, right? Which, I mean, I did the math and it made sense for me. But as someone who wants to be able to guide and be as transparent and not be salesy in any way to the new sellers, right? It was hard for me to find that middle ground because, like, how can I suggest a reprice that's going to cost? It would never make sense. Never in the world. No. Even then, right? You mentioned, like, and I say this very transparently and honestly, like $47, $49 US per month is peanuts for what you're getting. That same software that I'm talking about, their starter plan was $200 a month, right? So a US for Canadians is going to be close to $300. So it's still super expensive to get these. So we're going to call it AI features, right?
Yeah.
When in reality, like you said, you're just getting penalized as a new. How are you going to compete with the big sellers if they're paying the creme de la creme? So you can't compete with them there. You're probably not buying as many units of the ASIN. So you're probably going to lose regional buy block. There's so much stacked against you as a new seller. So when 100%. I discovered like this whole, like, well, the way you structured Aura, I fell in love with it, right? So, and the fact that your customer service is A1 too, like that's awesome. And it's a perfect segue to be like, okay, like what separates, right? A regular repricer that is just essentially rule-based 100% to something like Maven that is, well, unique, right? To you guys built it. Like, what is Maven? Like, me and you, we know about AI and all, but your average person, they're going to hear AI and a repricer, like, what, you branch ChatGPT to this? Like, can you explain a little bit 100%. To the viewer, like, what do you mean AI is helping you reprice? Can you give us a little view on that?
Yeah, what does that look like practically, right? In repricing, we have basically, there's basically three main categories of types of strategies. And we use the term strategy because you're not just loading in all your listings and saying reprice, right? Like we need to know what you want us to do, right? Rule-based is the one that has existed since all eternity. It's very specific, lots of settings. You can really control it, but it is limited in a lot of ways because it's only going to do exactly what you tell it to do. There's velocity-based, which is mainly popular on the private label side, so we don't get into that as much. And then there's AI. Let's talk AI. AI as a subject, right? If we're viewing this academically for a second, is one of the broadest umbrellas of all eternity. I have recently had somebody be like, okay, you guys have AI. What LLM, large language model, do you guys use? I'm like, well, none. That's AI now. When everybody says AI publicly, they basically mean large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, that kind of stuff. AI has a lot of variations to it. There's machine learning, right? So if you're a private label, I've got 6 months of your data, I'm probably going to train on that data and then dictate what to do moving forward. With reselling, you don't have that ability because there's other variables in place. There's your competition, things like this. And so what we do, and again, we're doing math here, right? Like LLMs are not great at math. They're very expensive, very slow. They're generating text, images, videos. That has nothing to do with what we do. If a repricing tool tells you we use OpenAI, run for the hills. Instead, we take a multifaceted approach. So game theory is a very interesting concept. Game theory is a subject matter inside of AI. It's basically how you make decisions that are optimal. So game theory is very old as a concept. And what's so beautiful about it is it works really well for resellers because what we're really doing is we are playing a game and we can set clear definitions of winning. And it is kind of turn based in a way, right? Like I'm going to make a change and you're probably going to react to it in some way, shape, or form. So with game theory, what we do is we study your competition. Every single one, we kind of basically build like a profile for each one. I know you're always going to match me. Well, if I know you're always going to match me, I'm going to change my behavior and take advantage of that. If you're always going to beat me by a penny, well, I'm going to change my behaviors to take advantage of that. So if I can do that long enough, I now have a really good memory bank of everyone on that listing and what they will do depending on what I do, kind of a thing, right? So we know it's true now, basically, right? What everybody's doing. We now need to kind of decide what the goal is. And when we first launched Maven, it has iterated a little bit. Now there's a few more controls for the end user, but it was kind of like Maven is here to get you to what we calculate as the optimal price. That's what we consider winning. The optimal price will fluctuate in real time. We actually don't show it on the front end because the calculations behind it's very long and calculated. But most of the time, if not, I mean, 99.8% of the time, the optimal price is above the buy box, which makes sense, right? If we think about this from an economics perspective, if I go into a market and there's a lot of competition, what's going to happen to the price? Downward pressure, right? So what Maven's trying to do is relieve that pressure. So it's taking what we know, where we want to be at, right? The buy box is sitting about $30. We calculate the optimal price at 38. The optimal price is trying to find that balance between making as much money as possible without really hurting sales velocity, right? Those two things we were talking about, we're trying to find that balance here as it's fluctuating because Q4, everything kind of rises, right? So it's more reactive in that way and dynamic. And so we use these two things as input into the system, and then it makes its decisions as far as what should I do based on this information that will give me the highest probability of not only taking my price there, because you can take your price wherever the heck you want. Ideally, you plus the buy box and the market is going there as well. So yes, getting sales above the buy box is important. How you go about doing that is very complicated and it changes in real time. There are cases, and you've already mentioned this, of companies saying we have AI. And what it really means is a more complicated, pre-configured rule-based thing. And there's no decision making inside of it. It is literally just if then statements, really elongated. And listen, if somebody tells you we have 15, 10, 12 AI strategies, that's not how this works. With us, we have one, we call it Maven. We wanted to give it a name because that's kind of, in vogue right now. Name all your AIs. And you can create multiple variations of Maven, but it's still Maven, right? It's still the same bones. But now what you can do is you can go in and we have an aggression slider because we had a lot of sellers say, I love Maven. I'm curious what Maven would look like if I wanted it to be aggressive. Interesting. So now we have that variation. So now you can basically go into Maven and say, well, I want you to do your AI awesomeness. However, I want to give you a little bit more direction in terms of what I want you to focus on. And so now we're kind of going from pure rule base, which has always existed, which is now basically antiquated. We went to pure black box AI. And now the demand, as sellers get more comfortable with AI and the concepts, are now saying, yes, I want AI, but I want a hybrid. I want to have a little bit of control and some tweaks to it where it makes sense. So that's roughly what we're doing, right? And obviously, I'm scratching the surface on how it works, but that's my best answer for wrapping your head around what we're doing specifically. So yes, we're using game theory in one aspect of it, but the whole thing is not just game theory. Game theory is really great. If we stop there, I think we'd miss a lot of value because you need to be able to define success. Otherwise, I mean, listen, if you give any AI free reign and it doesn't know what its goal should be, it's going to be pure chaos. And so you end up in a lot of weird scenarios where your prices are doing things that are not justified. And that's what we focus on really well.
Is it done on ASIN by ASIN level?
Yes. So everything in Aura is SKU level, because you might have multiple SKUs per ASIN. We do kind of sync those to a degree. But yes, everything is done. Like we might see the same competitor on 15 of your listings, but Aura is intentionally not linking those because how they reprice on one listing might be very different than the next. And so again, what we're trying to do is reverse engineer basically their repricing strategy. That's fundamentally what we're doing. Even if they're doing it manually, I'm still reverse engineering their behavior patterns. What's interesting is that will change over time, right? So the way somebody was repricing 2 months ago against you, they might have been matching you. Today, they're trying to sell out. Now they're 5 cents beneath you no matter what you do. So we'll also intentionally forget that memory and relearn it to ensure that we're not making the same assumptions as when we initially learned their behaviors.
As someone who's sold in both the United States and in Canada, it's a completely different market, right? It's the same business model to a certain
Yeah.
extent, but the terms of like the volume's not the same.
Yes.
The kind. So how, is it reacting in a way where it understands volume on the SKU, right? And again, I'll fork that in saying, is it taking
Yeah.
your data or is it taking Keepa's API? Like, how are you determining, right?
Yeah.
When you initially list your SKU and you
Yeah.
kind of want to be a little bit more hands off, like how
Yeah.
is Maven doing this for you in a Canadian market?
Yeah. So funny enough, at that aspect of the equation, it's roughly the same. Here's what's cool. The way we designed this out was we wanted something that would be as dynamic and flexible as possible because we know that, there's only a few of us working on it. There's going to be things that we can't foresee. So it's kind of like the emergency fund concept, right? People say you should have an emergency fund for your life. Okay, well, what emergency? I don't know. Do we have a category? No. Do we know when? No. Okay, so let's take a generalized approach that no matter what type it is, the solution still works. And so we kind of take that similar approach, at least at a high level, where it's less about the data is different. The data is roughly the same. It's still humans, right? Fundamentally, it's still humans and how they're reacting. And so what we do is when you first jump onto a listing, we can't pull historical data unless you've been on that listing before via the API. We will start learning immediately when you're available and we can start to watch it. So there can be a day or so of not optimal performance because we're actually just testing things and seeing what's going on and getting that data. We're not pulling Keepa data. I don't love Keepa data for repricing stuff. My reason for that is what we do is way more granular, right? So if Keepa is checking a listing again, even once every 15 minutes to get the snapshot, because that's what they're doing. They're web scraping, right? They pull up the page, extract the data, and say that's what it is. Even at every 15 minutes for a listing, you're still missing out between those times. It's a one-time snapshot. And so can I see high level movements? Yes, but I can't really see the level of granularity I need per competitor because I'm not just looking at what's happening on the listing. The listing is important, but the listing really is the outcome of all the competitors' behavior. So what I really need to know is what are you doing every single time I change my price or every single time somebody else changes their price, right? And I might find, here's a good example, on some listings against Amazon, I can match them. Not a problem. Other listings have to be 1 penny beneath them. Other listings have to be $5 beneath them. Well, how do you, in rule base, you have to set that value. So if you set it too high, you miss out. If you set it too low, you miss out. So what Maven can do is it can actually run the experiment. It can actually say, okay, we'll match. It's not rotating to me. That's weird. Let me go beneath by 1 penny and see if that pulls it. That didn't work either. Let me go to 2. Let me go to 4. Let me go to 8. Okay, 8 works. But here's the important part. 8 works only when competing with Amazon on that listing. So if there's another competitor that now jumps in and is competing differently, I'm not going to treat them as if they are Amazon, right? Because they might be doing something different. So what works against one seller, one competitor, does not necessarily work against the same or a different competitor on the exact same product listing. That's where things get complicated.
No, but that's really cool. And even for
Yeah.
me, as someone who's been in the game for 4 years and like obsessed with this, is like I'm also learning new things. And that's what happens when
Yeah.
you talk to a founder of
Yeah.
a repricer, right? But like right away, what like I heard is, again, I find myself really astute looking at Keepographs. Like I can
Yeah.
look at it inside 30 seconds. It's a story for me, right? I see it all.
Right.
But something you mentioned that I really like is, again, we're only getting snapshots of like essentially every 15 minutes. And that's why, like, when you hover your mouse over the keep line, like you'll see, like,
It
it'll
jumps.
highlight a certain part, right? So in those batches of 15 minutes, the price can change so many times. The buy box can
Right.
also rotate to different people so many times, but Keep is not necessarily getting that because it's only
Right.
taking every 15 minutes. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And that ties like the knot that you were saying at the beginning of like, why can't you do it yourself? Is even
Yeah.
me, as someone who's been 4 years, I look at Keepographs and I think I'm looking at the full picture, but there's so much detail in between all that. So that's really cool. And
Right.
again, segues to something that's really cool. Maven, that I'm
Yeah.
curious about, is this new, I think it's new, like the hyperdrive mode, right?
Yeah.
I thought
Hyperdrive. Yeah.
API requests were, I think, every 2 minutes with Amazon. So all like repricers that were saying, yeah, we update every couple of minutes. Whereas now you guys essentially are able to reprice. I don't have the exact figure, but
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
let
I'll
you
tell you.
let me know on that.
Yeah, so this has kind of gone away where, again, if you were on the lowest tier, they would say you can only reprice every 15 minutes. They intentionally slowed you down. They were doing that to basically get you to want to pay more for better performance. Again, I disagree with that entirely. We've always had instant repricing, and you will see that all the time. What's the speed? Instant. Okay, well, what does that really mean in reality? Instant means when I receive the price change notification, which is what we rely on, in my system, I process it. I look at your strategy, look at Maven. It gives me an answer. I send it back, and we're done. So there is no delay outside of literally processing it, right? So it's as fast as I can get it in my system. However, the reality is when you submit that to Amazon, for it to be processed on their end, actually set live, on average is 1.5 to 2 minutes. So instant really means 1.5 to 2 minutes. And we were kind of the first company to publicly mention that because we're like, no, there's a lot of confusion here. Like, it's not instant across the board. It's a marketing thing that just got stuck, basically. So yes, your instant repricing is going to be 1.5 to 2 minutes on average. During Q4, it can grow to 5 minutes, 15 minutes. Again, outside of our control.
Yeah.
However, when we rebuilt Aura from the ground up, we found an interesting workaround. We can't do this for everything. There is a engineering limit. But for a certain number of listings, I can do that full round trip in less than 10 seconds. And all you as a user have to do is hit a toggle and say, do that, please. How we do it is very complicated. But it's beautiful because, well, it's actually confusing because I've had people be like, but you have instant. How is this faster than instant? And we have our go-to, like, okay, here's what that really means in reality. We're very transparent about that. I think more repricing software companies should be. Um, and obviously we needed a name that was faster than instant. So it was either warp drive or hyperdrive, and we all just liked hyperdrive. We're like, yep, that works. We know it's kind of confusing, but it's one of those stalemates where if you say, well, our repricing speed is 1.5 to 2 minutes, and everybody else is saying instant, and we're really saying the exact same thing in reality, you look worse than the
Yeah.
other when really it's the same daggum thing. So what happens when you have, like a Q4 season, right? You have something like Maven who is taking advantage of the prices going up, the competitors selling through. You're selling toys in Q4 as an example. Your prices should be able to climb higher, crush it. But then on top of this strategic approach to it, you now have hyperdrive enabled and you're reacting faster than your competition could. So imagine this. All of us kick off repricing events to update our price. A timer gets set for 1.5 to 2 minutes. Well, in 10 seconds of that 1.5 to 2 minutes, yours is already live. You already have the buy box. You already raised your price, whatever. In that period of time between that being done and the rest of them actually being confirmed and set live, you owned everything. So when you play that out enough cycles, your competition is actually reacting to outdated information. So they can't keep up, which is really interesting. So again, by the time they've submitted a update, let's say we react, I change my price, you go to react, that timer kicks off. I've already updated, somebody else came in, I updated again. The price has changed 5 times before yours actually went live for a reaction to a price change 5 price changes ago. So you're, in theory, updating your price in the past.
In repricing, there's, and we're going to talk about in a second, like all the
Yeah.
strategies, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it comes down to, yeah, okay, there's strategies, but it's speed, right? Because
Yeah.
you're competing with other sellers on listings that there are multiple sellers, and
Yeah.
it's about who has the most optimal price. And I'll allow you, because again, what makes it allow you to sell over a buy box? Why? How does that make sense? Why would somebody, why
Yeah.
would Amazon say, hey, we're going to give your higher price as the price that we're advertising to the customer?
Yeah.
At face value, it makes more sense. There's a reason. You want to give us a little bit of reason why? Like, I don't know if the term is regional buy box or if it's like something a little bit different.
So it's not
why is it
regional.
different? Why is it like, why are you getting a different price than me?
So a few things can happen. There are some interesting behaviors on Amazon that we take advantage of. If you do it fast enough, you can pull a buy box up when it rotates to you, and you will own it for some period of time, even if there's technically a lower price. So there's things like that that Maven has in its tool belt that it can take advantage of, so it knows when to do it and when not to do it. There are other cases, though, where it's purely behavior. If I know you're always going to match me, well, what I'm going to do is, let's say it's just you and I on a listing, right? This is why knowing how many competitors, all this stuff matters, because your strategies, your opportunities can change. So if it's just you and I know you're always going to match me. I'm going to test raising my price up 2 pennies. Well, now what's going to happen is that seller is now the lowest offer on the listing. So in a lot of role-based strategies, you have something, we call it the maintenance section, where you say, listen, if I'm the lowest seller, even if I'm in the buy box, raise me higher. Don't let me lose money. So, okay, I'm going to test it. I'm going to go up, right? Go up 10 cents, 50 cents, whatever. And I'm going to sit there. I'm going to see what you do. And I'll give it 5 minutes. I'll give your repricer enough time to react. And I'll see, did you come up with me? Oh, you came up with me? Perfect. Guess what? We're both going to make some more money here. And this is where rule-based really falls. Unless you have one strategy per SKU you have and you change the settings every 5 minutes, you can't do this kind of stuff, right? Rule-based strategies do exactly what you tell it to do. Even if there's a clear opportunity to do something better, they will not do that because they have not been told to do that. With AI, it can see all these scenarios and say, well, what's more important right now? What really should make sense? And again, you don't know that it's going to work, right? The AI doesn't know either until it tests it. So I might raise my price. Wait, you didn't come up with me. Okay. So that tells me a few things. Either one, you're not set up to raise prices, or two, maybe I went above your max. So let me cut that in half. Maybe we went up 50 cents. Let's go down to 25 cents and give it another 5 minutes. There's a lot of experimentation that Maven will do to understand what does work and then take advantage of it, right? So, there's a lot of mental models. I love the concept. There's one that I think is really good called Explore, Exploit. So what you want to do is you want to explore everything because you have no freaking clue, right? So you explore all the possibilities, run experiments, and then once you have that data, now you can exploit it. That's essentially what we're doing. So again, you can't do that as a human. Rule-based strategies can't do that. So there's a lot of ways to raise prices and get sales above the buy box. Most of the time, you're actually raising the buy box up for some short period of time and it's dropping back down. So it's not above the buy box. You're technically still in the buy box, but we short-term raised it, got a sell, and popped it back down.
In the industry, is called the yo-yo method, right? Like where it's just like you're.
Yes and no. So yo-yo is very interesting. Yo-yo is very rule-based. You can do this in Maven now. We have added that. Maven does it, again, way more dynamically. It understands when's the optimal time to do it, so the frequency, and by how much. So it's going to experiment and try random things to see what works. Yo-yo specifically is very structured. It is every 3 hours, go to my max price for 20 minutes. Those are the inputs, right? You got 3 inputs there. It won't deviate. It won't self-optimize. It will just do that. And so I had a call yesterday with a group, and they're like, when do I use that? Well, you use that when you intimately know a listing and you have experimented yourself. There are cases, AI is awesome. It is not a silver bullet. It does not handle everything beautifully. It's not perfect, right? So there are going to be times where you have better insights than Maven on some listings. Great. Take advantage of that. So for most sellers, especially new sellers, you don't need to be doing the yo-yo. Just use Maven. It's going to do a better job than you will. Because I see a lot of sellers apply the yo-yo to every listing and they say every 3 hours do this. How do you know every 3 hours is optimal for each one of your listings, your hundreds of listings? And how do you know that going to your max is really the right play? Because that also means that you set your maxes correctly. Most people don't. Now, Maven will dynamically set those for you and fluctuate them correctly, right? So if the market's really going up like Q4, your max price is riding up with it. It's not gonna limit you and hinder you. So in repricing, there's kind of what we teach, which is like the main foundation. There's more advanced nuance stuff that if you really know what works, do it. You can. We're not holding you back. But for new sellers getting started in repricing, don't go down that route quite yet.
It's ironic, isn't it?
It
Because
is.
we
Yeah.
talked about how the SaaS companies that were
Yeah.
repricing gatekeep AI from new sellers by having a high price point.
Yeah.
But the ones that the AI is probably going to serve best is the new seller.
Yes.
Because as a new seller, there's so much to learn. You got to learn how to read a keep chart. You got to learn how to estimate buy, how to replan, how to track, how to account, how to do all these things. The last thing on your list is how to reprice. And it's such a big part of our job. Like that's what, okay. There's the whole concept. We could go down a rabbit hole of like you make your margins when you buy it, right? Like when you buy 100%. A good price, it's really hard to sell at a loss. But even that being said, a repricer can save your ass a lot by doing a lot of this for you. And like you mentioned so many different like micro strategies just in one that Maven does for you as a new seller.
Yes.
And it's funny because the more experience you get, we're not at a point yet where like it will know intimately as much as you would because you've been selling a certain SKU for a whole year, right?
And you have intuition, you have experience that you're pulling. You might be like, this is kind of like this one other SKU, very similar. I'm going to try and apply the thing I learned from this one to this one, and that happens to work. That's a whole different ballgame, you know? And so I like to be very transparent. What we built is fantastic. You can check out our X account. We reshare, people showing sales above the buy box. We saw somebody, they went from, I think it was like $60-ish to $120 in 4 hours on actual sales, not just the price, actual sales. It is phenomenal. But I will say that for the other repricing companies that come out here and they're like, oh, this is the end all be all and everything. It's not reading your mind. Like, just like humans have blind spots and stuff like that, we are also limited in some of the data we would like to factor in, that either it's just too difficult to do it or you don't have access to it. So we experiment with that from time to time. What does this data set look like? Does it actually help? Because a lot of things in our world is counterintuitive, by the way. You assume, well, if we factor in this new data set, it's going to make it 10 times better. And you find out actually it hurts performance. Or the inverse is true. This is stupid. You throw it in, oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing ever, right? So a lot of what we do is very counterintuitive. And there are cases where when somebody says, I want this, the rationale makes sense. And it's a very intelligent thing to want. The reality of that data is it tells you something you already know, and it's not impactful. It sounds nice on paper, but the reality is it actually is not strategic at all. It tells you what you've already known, right? So there's stuff like that where we wish it was impactful. The reality is it's really not. But yeah, it's funny, as sellers get much larger, more established, more in the weeds, they've seen a lot, they're more experienced, they can override things. And Aura is designed to be able to do that without you having to do that and being overwhelmed. So we developed something called the Aura method. I've taught repricing for a decade plus at this time, and my recommendations have also changed as I've learned and as our platform has evolved and all that stuff. And we really found a foundation of how to set up a repricer that works for pretty much everyone as a starting place. There might be subtle changes, but they're not major. And it works like this. You need 3 core strategies. The reason why you need 3 is because you're looking at the age of inventory for your listings. Why does age of inventory matter? Because that's when you decide how to change your goals, right? When you first come into stock, what do you care the most about? Making money. If you've held it for 3 months, do you really care about making the most money, or are you just trying to get rid of it? You're trying to get rid of it. So we have this this linear approach to the behaviors based on your inventory. We cut these into 3 phases or 3 strategies. So the way we do this is that first strategy, we're using Maven. Can be default settings. It is there to, again, get you to the optimal price, increase profit margin, all that good stuff. We're not trying to move things super fast. We're not trying to slow them down super fast either. Again, balance here. Then as we get to, let's say, 31 to 60 days, we want to become slightly more aggressive. Not overly. We're not trying to liquidate quite yet, although some people will at this stage. Most of the time you don't need to. So we say, okay, I'm still going to use Maven, but I'm going to use that aggression slider. And I'm just going to take it from right there in the middle, 0.5, to a 0.7. So slightly more aggressive, meaning it is not testing higher prices as frequently and as aggressively. Because that's not really the goal anymore. Again, your goals will dictate your strategy. That's fundamentally what happens here. And then as we get to, let's say, 61 plus days, so we've held it too long, now we need to focus on that. We have 2 options. We can build a rule-based liquidation strategy, which I don't love as much anymore. That used to be the go-to. Now we're going to use Maven, but we're going to set it at the most aggression level, which is 1.0. So 0, less aggressive, 1, the most aggressive. And notice, by the way, I said we're starting at 0.5. There are cases where you want to be even more conservative. Most of the time, you don't need to do that as much. There is, again, a sweet spot here. So we have these 3 strategies, and we were talking about, the 2 levers, right? Sales velocity, how much are we moving? Profit margin, how much are we making? These 2 things oppose. What we're doing with these 3 strategies is we're saying we're going to start balanced, but as time goes on, I'm going to start caring a lot more about sales velocity and a lot less about my profit margin. Because again, we need cash flow. We need capital coming back. You make bad decisions. It happens to all of us. You accept it, you move on. So then the question is, well, how do I automate that? Because that's a lot. All my listings are in a different phase of that cycle. What's going on here? So that's when we build a age of inventory workflow. So we have a feature called workflows. Basically, it's like a mini automation builder. Do you ever use Zapier? It's like a very, very small version of that. And you can go in there and say, okay, well, if my age of inventory is 0 to 30, apply my conservative, we call them levels just to make it easier. Level 1, Maven. Great. If my age of inventory is 31 to 60 days, apply level 2, Maven. So now we're, pushing up that 0.7, right? A little bit more aggression. If my age of inventory is 61 days or more, go to my liquidation version of Maven. And what's beautiful about the way it's structured is what happens when you restock. A lot of people get really in a bad position when they don't automate it correctly, or they try to do this manually because, they moved it over to a liquidation strategy. It's hyper aggressive. They forgot that was still there. They relist it 3 months later and they go, what the heck is going on? Why am I just liquidating this stuff? Well, that's the strategy you assigned to the listing. What's cool is this will run. We run it roughly every hour is how we trigger this. So once an hour, it's just going to check your listings and be like, what needs to happen? So if you relisted it and we catch it, we're going to say, well, what is the age of inventory? Well, it's 0 to 30. Okay, go back. Restart this cycle, right? Your inventory is going through a cycle. It will exit that cycle at one of the 3 phases, but you might exit at phase 2 or phase 3 and then actually restocked. So now we need to go back to phase 1. And so what's cool about that structure is, let's say you're being too aggressive in phase 3. Great. Don't rebuild the whole thing. Just go to that setting in that version of Maven and drag the slider a little bit to the left, hit save. Your work's done. So now what we can do is we can very easily manipulate how we're behaving, because things can change without having to rebuild the whole thing. And that system works just as well if you've got 20 SKUs versus 20,000 SKUs. It doesn't matter. And the importance of getting in on not the sooner side, right? You don't want to join when you have no inventory. That's irrelevant. Don't do that. Wait, it's fine. We'll still be here. The great thing about doing that when you have enough SKUs, but not so many that you waited too long, is you're able to experience it, tweak it to some of the nuances that you personally care about, because everybody is slightly different. And what's cool is, again, we can take that same concept, we can speed it up, slow it down, doesn't matter. And then you can just forget about it. There's always exceptions, right? Like no matter what repricing tool you're going to use, there's always edge cases for listings that are just weird. That just happens. But for the most part, now you can just refocus on sourcing, shipping, that kind of stuff, and know that the sales side is just humming in the background doing what it needs to do. So now you don't have this conundrum of, I know these 5 listings are bad. I know I need to do something about it. Well, why haven't you for 3 months? Well, it's emotional. I don't want to accept as a seller that I made a bad decision. I don't want to even look at it or acknowledge it, whatever. Great. I understand. Been that person, been in those scenarios. But if software was making those decisions, again, based on how you designed it, you still control when things happen and what happens, you wouldn't still be thinking about it 3 months later. It would have already been handled. Right? I mean, and this is where I think a lot of sellers don't see this version of repricing and how it works. It's just, well, I assign a strategy and it does a bunch of stuff. Simplistically, sure. But when you structure it correctly, what you're really doing is you're building this machine that handles your sales for you in the way you want without you having to be in the loop. Things will happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, do you want to wake up and have seen that it's already been dealt with, or do you want to now have another task you have to deal with? You're already busy, right? And so I have seen our users where we installed these things, they came in doing 20 grand a month. Now they're doing 80 grand a month, and it's the exact same setup. They're like, I haven't changed anything. I'm just shipping in more. Everything is automated. I review my account once a week just to triple check a few things, look for those edge cases. I deal with them if they're there. Outside of that, I don't touch it.
Insane is the right word, because when I started, again, I won't mention the name, I used another repricer, and it was essentially all rule-based, right? They promoted AI, but it was glorified rule-based.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn, like I said, as an Amazon seller, and we've scratched the surface of repricing strategies, right? And 100%. I can already tell that there's going to be a viewer that's like, well, you scratch the surface and I'm already so confused. And that's the whole, and I'm not even doing it on purpose. That's the whole selling point for Aura is like, I'm dumbfounded, like just listening to you talk about all this, because there's so much that I had to learn myself through experience, right? And like, okay, does it pay dividends later? But I could have been focusing on sourcing and focusing on the things that move the lever. And to add on to that, Canada specifically has this, I don't want to call it problem. It's not a problem, but it's a trap, right? Because we don't have as much volume as the United States, right? We're literally 10 times less than the United States. And the consumer habit over here is less than the United States. So general volume is less. So doesn't mean anything. Very profitable in Canada. I'm able to sell in Canada. It just means that there's listings that have this sort of, I'm going to call it volume trap. And volume trap is somewhere you don't want to be, because when you buy inventory and you send it in and you're expecting to make 70% ROI because there was not that many people on the listing, when you send it in and you're not getting any sales, right? So cool, 70% ROI. You're not getting sales because Canada doesn't have the volume. And it might have been a variation listings, and variation is another part of it that's even more complicated for Canadians because it takes US data. And a lot of new sellers are buying these things. It's not moving. It's sitting in their inventory. And they're also told, don't lower the buy box. Don't go under the buy box. Whenever you do, don't lower the buy box. Okay. Yes, we don't want to price tank a profitable listing, but when things don't move, we need to sell. And I will get to the point that like, hey, I'll accept losing at a loss. What's the 20% loss when I can get my money back and I can plug it to good inventory? So having, for me, myself, like I had systems where we were ourselves, me and my VA, going in and looking at products that were 60 days old and plus and doing the repricing strategies myself by essentially moving my max price down myself. Right. So like how counterintuitive is that compared to having an AI that's able to do it for you? And again, that you have you're able to customize it to be like, hey man, I don't care. Sell it at a loss after 20%, 30% loss. I don't care. I want just to roll inventory. And like, quite frankly, transparently, that gets me super excited. And not for nothing, it just doubles down on why a new seller kind of needs this, because it takes this off its hands. And you won't see it. The work is not done in front of you on your front end. It's all on the back end, but it's doing so much work for you. And again, okay, month 1 might be a little bit early to get it, but it's better to get it early. And if you're in this for a year plus, right, losing your first month or two by subscribing to Aura and having everything being repriced, and again, understanding the system it is, repricing is super sticky. If you're in Amazon and you've done this more than 2 months, you have a repricer and you're always going to have a repricer. I've never met an Amazon seller that's done it more than 2 months that doesn't have a repricer. You might as well pick the right one early and
Yeah,
invest in learning it early, right? You mentioned the customer support aspect. I'm
yeah,
assuming like if we want to book for like a certain strategy, like, hey, my storefront, like my specific, can you take a look at how I have it set up? Can you
100%.
recommend me anything? I'm assuming that's something you guys offer too.
We do a lot, man. I mean, here's the thing. I know what it feels like to pick a repricer. It's daunting, right? Because everybody says they're the best, and I very much am self-aware that I am highly biased here, right? Here's the thing. Almost all of us offer a 14-day free trial, no credit card asked for. So if you're unsure if it's too soon, here's the beautiful part. You jump in, create your account. Again, no credit card, you got 14 days. Well, here's what you do. You create the account, you immediately reach out to support and say, hey, I want to schedule an onboarding or a setup call. We get you on there. Let's say we can't talk to you for 4 days. We're busy. Don't worry about it. On that fourth day, when we sit down with you live, we're going to restart your trial for 14 days. You need 14 days of actually using it, not just like I technically had access. Nobody cares about that, right? That onboarding will ensure you're set up correctly, because what I don't want to have happen is you jump in, you kind of fiddle around and go, it didn't work. Well, you didn't set anything up. Naturally, it's not going to work, right? Let our team help, understand what you're trying to achieve, build the things out, off to the races. Also, now you know how to reach out to Finn via live chat. You have Casey's email. If you need mine, I'll give you mine. So if we need to make further tweaks after, which does happen, we just say, okay, what's going on? And we tweak it. Easy. You will know within the first 3 to 5 days if it's a good fit. My whole thing is, listen, if it's going to cost you $50 a month as an example, you got half a month, you get to use it. Did it make you more than $50 in half the time? If it did, even if it broke even, by the way, because if you're still new, even it's like, well, yeah, I went up, but it paid for itself. That's a good sign.
A win.
That's actually the sweet spot. Now moving forward, it's gonna be ROI positive. In terms of optimization stuff, we don't just sit here and say, hey, you've already had your onboarding call, so you're one and done. No, if you're like, hey, I've made some changes, or hey, we made these changes 2 weeks ago. Can we sit down again, and have you review my account and see if there's anything obvious that we should change now that we've adjusted? Yes, of course we'll do that. I've done that. I literally a few months ago I sat down with about 300 of our users, just me, and I did purely optimization calls. So I pulled them in, asked 2 questions. What are they trying to achieve? What's their biggest bottleneck right now? Most of the time it was cash flow. Okay, that tells me kind of how they're thinking. I can look at your dashboard and tell you exactly what your strategies and your workflows are designed to do just looking at the outputs, right? So if you're OA, I'm first and foremost looking at your actual ROI, because what you buy at and what you sell at, two very different things, right? You might buy at 60%, but you're really selling at like 35 to 40%. So I'm looking at, are you at least 30 to 60% ROI for OA, right? Actual sales. That lets me know you've got cushion. If you're about 20 or less, I get concerned and I will tend to say you might have a sourcing problem. And we'll be straightforward too, right? We will tell you, hey, it's not a repricing thing. Everything here is great. You're buying not aggressive enough. So we'll fix that. Everything else is going to take care of itself. I'm then looking at your buy box percentage. At least in the States, I like to see anywhere from 40 to 60%. Some cases can be different. For the most part, that's the sweet spot. Because again, what am I looking for? I'm looking for balance between sales velocity and profit margin. Well, I'm looking at ROI for how much are we making. I like ROI, I just think that way. I'm looking at buy box for sales velocity. Because if I see your buy box percentage is 80%, your ROI is 20%, I go, hold on, you're way too aggressive. I need to slow you down, be more conservative on your pricing. Yes, you're going to have less sales. Yes, you're going to have less buy box ownership, but guess what's going to happen? Your ROI is going to go through the freaking roof. The inverse is also true. I will see 120% ROI. I will see 12% buy box ownership. You need to be more aggressive, and guaranteed every single time. What's your biggest bottleneck right now? Cash flow. Yeah, I bet, because you're letting things sit there way too long. So we're going to turn up the heat a little bit. Your ROI will come down, 10 to 15%, but you're going to see that buy box percentage go up. So, what are we playing at here, right? Again, rebalance, rebalance, rebalance. So even I will jump into calls with sellers who are just like at their wits end. They're like, I just don't know what to do right now. Great. I'll tell you if it's a repricing problem. If it is, I'll fix it there live with you. I'll explain everything I'm doing. Make sure you're comfortable with it. Sometimes it's psychology, because there's like this mental blocker of that feels wrong. And I go, okay, let's talk about that first before we make any changes. And we work through that. We test it for 2 days. Hey, if you hate it after 2 days, email me. I'll reverse everything after 24 hours. Don't change anything. It's perfect. Sometimes it is everything here looks great. You're not buying enough inventory. You're not buying good enough inventory. Don't focus on repricing when that's not really the problem, because now you're just going to spin your wheels and waste your time when really the problem's over here, right? So again, we've been sellers. We know how this goes. So our team is very in the weeds on a lot of this stuff. So we're going to read between the lines. If we think you're making an assumption when you're presenting something, we're going to pull back the curtain a little bit and be like, hey, are you assuming X is true? Yes. X is not true. So let's correct that first, and now we can move forward on the same page. So we're not giving you canned responses here. We're really understanding, where are you at? What are you struggling with? What are you trying to achieve? What mental blockers do you have? And what are you struggling with even outside of repricing? Repricing is a multiplier. It's an amplification of your inventory. If you got crap inventory, no repricer is going to do anything for you. If your buy costs are above the buy box price, I'm refunding you your money. I've only had to do that one time. What do? I've tried everything. I bet you have. Here's a tip. If you tried everything and nothing works,
Might be you.
it's a you problem, unfortunately. But we're obviously empathetic and sympathetic to that, right? So it's like, hey, repricing is not a good fit for where the business is at. It can't sustain it. Here's your money back. Here's people we know that teach repricing or that teach sourcing. We'll ask, hey, where are you learning all these things? You need to get on that path first. Fix that, come back, we'll take care of you, but I'm not going to keep your money when I can't provide you value.
Yeah, and that's where at the beginning, when I mentioned having founders that like have been in the business and understand sourcing, right? Because like, I'm willing to bet that, okay, your competitors, I'm sure they understand repricing to a certain degree if they're
Sure.
doing it, right? But you're also like, it's sales, right? You got to market, you got to do all this. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily a great Amazon seller. You're a great business operator, right? As a SaaS company. But I love the fact that you guys are able to go in and attack those and address those problems at face value right away. Be like, hey, so the repricer, like you said, is a multiplier, right? You need to have solid foundations in the skills of arbitrage, right? For your repricer to work for you. But if you're not giving it enough, and I heard you mention something that I love and I teach, but I want you to detail this.
Okay.
You mentioned, right? Because there's obviously you don't source good enough inventory. That's one thing. But you mentioned you don't buy enough inventory. Yeah. Can you give me an example of someone coming to you saying, "Hey, my repricer is not doing its good job," but your answer is, "Hey, you're actually not buying enough." How does that like affect your repricer?
Okay, so I will have users come to us and say, "Hey, we have optimized the crap out of my account. We're doing great. What's next?" Just like what do I not know, kind of a thing. And I'll obviously review the account and just make sure there's nothing obvious. And my go-to answer is basically looking at how many units they're carrying and the geographical distribution. So prior to regional buy boxes being publicly known, we found out about them early. I had friends I was teaching wholesale back in the day, and we kind of had an inkling of what was happening. So we said, you know what? You have unlimited access to units because it's a wholesale account. There's no limitation there. I want you to increase your volume of orders in your PO by 10% until it breaks. And let's just see what happens. It's 10%, right? Kept doing it. 6 months later, still hasn't broke. Nothing else changed. So what's happening? Again, now we know we were shipping in more units that were getting then geographically distributed across the country, which is now creating access to regional buy boxes. So we have a lot of people ask, hey, how do you reprice with regional buy boxes? You don't. You physically can't, because you have one price, right? So there is the global buy box, there is regional buy boxes, and the API, we don't see it that way. We see basically the seller and then is in buy box or not in buy box, and we'll have 4 of those. Okay, not super helpful, but thanks. Again, you can't optimize for it well, in my opinion. There's a few workarounds, but I don't love them quite yet. Where if you see that you're in North Dakota as an example, or let's use Canada, right? Let's say you're Toronto's East Coast, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so let's say you ship in a bunch of stuff, you go West Coast, and you see it's doing well. Well, you only have one price. So if I optimize for West Coast, I'm now intentionally de-optimizing for East Coast. That might make sense in some cases. Most cases, it doesn't, because you kind of want both. But again, you have one price. If you could have 2 prices, perfect, not a problem. Can't do that. So the hack, funny enough, is just get more units there physically, first and foremost. Most sellers are not doing this. They're just shipping in, letting it ride, and it is what it is. And they're like, well, I want to optimize my prices over there. I'm like, yeah, but you have 2 units there. You got 300 over on the East Coast. Why would you over optimize for 2 units on the West Coast? That makes no sense. Well, but I'm geographically there and there's not a lot of sellers geographically there. Sure, that means you don't need to do much, right? Like they're going to pick you because it's fastest on the shipping side of things, right? Shipping speed matters here. That's why geographical and regional buy boxes matter a ton. It's just you are physically there and can get there faster. Price certainly still matters, but not in the way people think about it. So for the most part, if you feel like you've optimized the crap out of your repricing, you're doing all the things, you're like, what comes next? Well, don't immediately go to, I'm going to go wider. You kind of need to go deeper in a strategic way. That doesn't mean just triple your units. It goes, okay, let me increase 10%. Let me increase 10%. Let me increase 10%. And if you're doing RA, OA, you do have limited access to units. So a lot of the sellers I talk to that really want to do regional stuff, I'm like, well, how many units can you actually buy? Because my assumption is you're already buying as many as you have access to. Well, yes. Okay, then it's irrelevant. Regional buy boxes only matter when you have relatively unlimited access to more inventory. If I can only buy 30 units doing OA, I'm buying 30 units, right? Like it's not like you're saying, oh, I'm only buying 10 right now just in case. Like you're already buying what you're buying. So sometimes sellers get trapped optimizing for things that they can't actually take action on.
Yeah.
It's important. You should understand it. But if that's your goal, you need to shift into a model or find a way to purchase 10 times the amount of units you currently source for each SKU. It's not going to work on every SKU, but that's how you approach it. And that's a common thing I hear with Canadian sellers, right? In the US, we have more regions, we have more distribution, we have hot pockets of demand, certainly, but even on the lower end on demand in like Midwest and stuff like that is still strong enough because of our consumer behavior. In Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's like mainly East Coast, but still kind of West Coast and like kind of nothing in the middle.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. I do a lot of FBM these days, and I want to say it's exactly right. It's you got some in Alberta and BC.
Yeah.
Very rare you're going to get the middle, and then most of the orders are going to Quebec or Ontario, right?
Right.
This subject is it makes me so passionate, right? Because certainly for new sellers, this is like your biggest alpha, right? I teach this to my students. You mentioned it, so might as well mention it because in Canada, right, we don't have that many provinces. I mean, there's not that many fulfillment centers either. The majority of the fulfillment center I've been sending boxes from, I don't know how long, go to Ontario or Alberta. I got a BC once, is there fulfillment centers in the other provinces? Yes. But the ones that are, I'm going to assume big enough, they got the logistics in there to be able to receive all those FBA boxes. And then unlike the United States, we don't have optimized shipments or where we can send to one. It's you send to one place and they're going to distribute. You have no control over that. You don't have placement fees like the United States, but you don't have control. And that's where, this is why like it's so passionate for me. It's like new sellers get into this catch-22 and it's a real problem. It's a real problem, which I'm hoping, like from what I heard, Maven will be able to help to a certain degree. Again, volume's not necessarily like the States. So you might get 20 sales, 30 sales on this listing, and there's 3 competitors. Well, again, something that most people will do, that I do, is you're going to hide how much inventory you have, right? You're going to put like a maximum order quantity of 6 so that people can't go stock your little stock count and keep on and try to see a downward staircase of how much units you have. So now we're in Canada. We are not sure on the volume. We're not sure if it's a trap or nothing like that. And we don't know how much to buy. So the new seller, who's, again, doesn't have the proof of concept yet, is buying, again, they see SellerAmp is suggesting 30 units sales per month. So they're going to go, there's 3 sellers. They'll use the very basic advice. They'll go, okay, 3, I'm going to be on the wall. Let's say there's 2. I'm going to jump on as the 3rd one. There's 30 sales divided by 3. I'll get 10. Right? What they don't know is that that seller that has 300 reviews has nothing to do with reviews. That's not why. That's also another common myth. Well, that I think like reviews might play a small role, but it's not the reason someone's getting the buy box. Right. And their high reviews often correlate with they've been in the game longer. They understand that if they go and get 30 to 50 units, or even like I often like to go like, okay, certainly if Keepa's telling me, hey, it's selling 50 times per month, I'll grab 50. Like, okay, it's a case by case basis. But it's one of the most things where you're coming in as a new seller, you don't even realize that you're coming in with 5 units and it was profitable and everything. Then you go, I never got the buy box. Why am I not getting the buy box? This must suck. And then that's how
Yeah.
like price tanking happens and such. But the reality is because and you mentioned it, speed, Amazon, I believe, right? And I truly think this, speed plays way more of a factor
It does.
than $2, right? Or $3. Amazon, no, like their main thing is keep customer happy. Right? That's why there is return abuse, right? Yeah, there's return abuse that comes with the game. The reason why we're able to sell double the retail price is because of that confidence that Amazon gave to the customer. So for that same reason, Amazon wants to be able to deliver to them as quick as possible. So if me being in Quebec, I send 50 units and it gets spread out and I got a little bit of units on BC and I got most of it in, you know, Amazon knows, right? Amazon knows most of the sales comes from the East Coast. So it's going to keep most of your inventory on the East Coast. If you're only sending 5, that baby's staying stuck on the
They're
East
just
Coast,
staying there. Right. And this is my whole point, right? Because I get a lot of pushback on this where people are like, no, you should reprice at the regional level, but you don't have to, is my point. And you just highlighted that beautifully. If you are physically there, you can be a little bit more expensive. And that trade-off makes sense for Amazon because like, yeah, but I can get it to you next day or overnight to the customer. What's $2? Like, yes, that breaks at a certain point. Of course, everything here is, you know, within certain bounds. That's reasonable. But that's the important part here. And Canada has this at a more macro level. The US doesn't have it the way you guys have it, but it's still here. And I think you guys are forced to deal with this and accept it. Whereas here, a lot of sellers don't have to deal with it. But if they were to understand it, they would, again, I'm not saying 5x your units, your inventory overnight, but slowly increase it. And even though you guys don't have the placement and all that stuff, I actually think that's better because you don't have to do the work. You just say, hey, here's 50.
Yeah.
You know the data more than I do. So yeah, keep 40 here, send 5 there, send 5 there. I don't care. Just give me exposure to that geographical location so that I can get those sales.
Exactly. So often I found the more you send, because again, you don't have any control. So it just becomes like this certain type of moat where it's the more you have confidence in going deep. And that's what I mentioned the catch 22, because it's only normal for newer sellers not to have that confidence. And that's where, if I tie it back into Maven, that gets me excited because we're taking the whole, you know, decision making out of the equation. We're going to let Maven, again, could you buy more? Yes. You guys are there in terms of customer service to maybe pinpoint that a little later if you don't find the results are at the rendezvous for Aura. But in reality, you can only do so much, right? You can source and then you get your own data, right? Is Maven working? If not, why? Maybe I should be buying more, right? All those things, like your data speaks to you. And that's why I find it really, really cool what Maven's able to do for the new seller, because there's already so many cards stacked against you. Having that and then giving the confidence of being able, because hopefully, right, Maven is able to increase sales, which gives them more confidence to replenish a little bit more aggressively. And again, that's where when I work with people personally, I push for more aggressive buys. But that's because I'm also there doubling down on their decision making. But it is something that I think that Canadians need to do a little bit more, is learn how to, I don't want to say be more risky, but like you gotta push the limit a little bit, because buying 5-6 units is not enough to compare. Okay, if there's nothing, if the listing is dead, there's almost no sales, and you're thinking, hey, if I drop the price by half, there's historic sales. Okay, then that's fine. But when you're competing, and that's where a repricer really shines, is when you're competing, it's important to also take into consideration it's not all the repricer's job. It's going to maximize when you have a job too, and it is sending enough inventory for the client. So that's really, really awesome. I also wanted to just mention the fact that Canada is slower, and this affects the United States too. Let's scrap Canada and say, you mentioned like Amazon in 2025 was very weird. Right. For Canada and the United States, I was in 2025. I participated in both. I want to say where like Amazon's a little bit weirder now is the whole ungating situation. It's very niche, right? It's a little bit harder to get ungated, even with legitimate invoices. But like, I'm going to more so end it on this note, because I know you love to talk about this too. It's like, it's never been harder to sell on Amazon, which is true. Right? You started, I think you said 10 years ago, something along those lines.
Oh man, selling was like 13 to 15 years ago, somewhere around that time frame,
I'm
I think.
willing to assume that
Way
okay,
easier.
some things were harder because there wasn't softwares, but at the same time, that's what made it easier.
Yeah, yeah. The
And
auto ungating, dude. I mean, I would be doing wholesale looking at brands and I would just pick a random ASIN, request it, and it would I knew if it took more than 2 seconds, it was auto approved. I'd wait, auto approved. Cool. I'll take them.
and
I
from
mean,
that point,
yeah.
we go from there to, let's say, COVID 2022,
Yep.
2023. It starts getting more and more strict to the point
Yep.
now where ungating, I've heard good things in the United States, but right now in Canada, ungating is essentially impossible. That's like, I'm going to put in that in quotes, right? Like where, but that's the moat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I rather that. I'm
Yeah,
happy
yeah.
that it's harder because you now need to be serious as a seller to sell on
Yeah.
Amazon. Right? You need to have these reprices. You need to be willing to invest in software to keep you on the top. And even then, even with all the softwares and Aura working at every single second of the day for you, you still got to eat shit for a year to really prove to Amazon
Yeah.
that you are a legitimate seller, right? And that's the
Yeah.
only way out. That's the only way the light on the other side of the
Right.
tunnel is showing up every day, right? Like
Right.
I say that because like one, I know you like to mention that, but two
Yeah.
is like people that are going to sign up to Aura, hopefully, like I don't want them to expect like this is gonna change your store. It's just a tool that is
Yes.
needed in the long run. Might as well use it early, and it's going to work for you. It is a
Yeah.
positive ROI, but it's not this magic tool that is going to turn your storefront into a
Yeah,
magical seller, right?
we're not going to fix your entire business overnight, right? Nobody's going to do that. Yeah, I mean, listen, I looked at the Marketplace Pulse report. What a lot of people are posting about right now is the first section, which was record, decade low record for new registrations for, new sellers. And only 16 roughly percent of those were US based. Most of them were Chinese. So people would naturally go, oh, it's done. No, read the rest of the report. It's not that long. You will also see the GMV. So basically the total sales of third-party sellers every single year keeps growing. So the opportunity is not gone away. And then if you look at the numbers for how many sellers doing over 1 million a year are, they went from 60,000 to a little over 100,000. Same thing for over 10 million a year. That also grew. So you could assume, okay, well, that's a consolidation, right? You have these large established sellers that are gobbling everything up and all the little guys are getting shunned away. Not true, because the number of people going into that segment also grew by a decent amount. So it's not a consolidation. And so, it's like when I did wholesale, and I talk about this a lot. Wholesale is just doing sales. That's all it is. Most sellers hate hearing the word no when they try to open up a brand direct account, and they never call back. I loved it because I know that the majority of people calling that brand get told no once and they never follow up. They never come back. I'm following up for 3 to 6 months, and I guarantee you I'm going to have an 80% chance of opening the account. It's the same concept. It all comes down to resilience. Is it more difficult? Yes. Is it at the same time being true a better opportunity moving through 2026? Yes. Why? You have less competition. Think about that. And the people who are competing with you have to care as much as you have to care. So now we're operating at a more professional level. In theory, what I think is going to happen is we're going to be able to see prices organically rise because less people are doing shady things. There's less competition as a whole, just economically speaking, that could push prices up 10, 20%. And yeah, you listen, if you are submitting whatever to Amazon, and they rejected you 4 times in a row and you stopped, don't. I
Keep
mean,
going.
honestly, I've talked to sellers who are like, I had to do it 18 times. Good. Because guess what? Everybody else stopped after the third. And they were like, I'm just wrapping up shop. And it's not complicated. It's not hard manual labor. It is just doing the same boring, mundane thing until it finally gets accepted. And most people won't do that. That's the competitive advantage moving forward.
Yeah, that's a
Just
skill.
being willing to do the things more times. And probably in a lot of cases, let's be honest, it's probably 1 to 2 more times than the average person really does it.
100%, man.
Come
Like
on, man.
the skill required for wholesale, like, okay, maybe private label is a little bit more intense, but for wholesale and Amazon,
Yeah.
right? They're both, they're both at face value. You're looking at a keeper graph. You're determining Can you get it for a profitable price and can you
Right.
sell it? But the skills involved in both, like it branches out, right?
Yeah.
Wholesale is more sales, right? That's
Yeah.
all it is. It's calling, ringing, making
Yep.
sure you have good. Like I don't do that much wholesale, but I understand that that's the reason I don't want to do it, right? Is I don't want to be picking up the phone.
It's a lot, yeah.
Doing this. I'd rather be on the other. But on the other side of the coin, doesn't mean that it doesn't require skills, right? It's
Right.
like the systems of like how are you going to replenish, right? How are you going to keep this data so in 2 years you're able to source stuff that you sourced 2 years ago? You know, I tell my students all the time, I can give you every single brand that I'm selling right now. You can't sell them.
Yes.
Okay. 100%. I'm not doing anything. I can show you my whole playbook and you will not be $1 million seller in year one, probably, right? There's always exceptions. Like it's about doing it over and over, understanding your systems. It's all systems. Like whether you're doing wholesale, whether you're building a SaaS company, whether you're
100%.
doing OA, it's all the systems around it. And the eating shit part and doing things different than others is all like that's important. So like you mentioned about like hammering down on the ungating, which is absolutely something that I tell people like, hey, if you're going to ungate, you're going to have to do it over and over and over again. And that's why I don't like to do it. Right. I don't like to do that because I don't like doing the mundane thing over and over again. So I decided to do something else that people don't like necessarily do. Is 4 years ago, I decided, hey, I'm going to completely forget about gate products that are gated. And you'll never hear anybody talk about that, but I never ungated one product. Well, okay, Lego 3 years ago, and I only started selling it this year. And I've only looked at the brands that I was able to sell. And I just tried to use the ultimate like opportunity.
It still
like,
works.
Hey, this is what I have. Like I only have so much capital, right? People love to talk about ungating all that. I won't go too much down the rabbit hole, but like your average new seller has like 15, 20K max to spend, right?
100%.
So okay, you can get ungated. I'm willing to bet you'll spend 15, 20K somewhere else that's already ungated product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And here's the thing. You know, you just said something important. Doing things differently. Well, what does that mean? Funny enough, to me, all it means is caring 10% more. If you can care about the details 10% more than the average seller, that at this point in the day is a competitive advantage. It is caring about the things that others go, oh, I'm just not going to do it. Care 10% more. 10% doesn't seem like a lot, but I promise you that is just enough to make the biggest difference. That's all I've ever done. I care just 10% more. And that allowed me to approach things vastly different than everyone else. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It doesn't matter if we're cold calling brands. It doesn't matter if we're doing OA. It doesn't matter if we're dealing with section 3s. Care 10% more and remind yourself, how do I naturally want to approach this right now? And how much do I care about it? Okay, let's get real about it. What would it look like if I cared 10% more? Funny enough, that little change will allow you to achieve things and overcome problems that in reality are minuscule, but in it feels existential. You get hit with an IP issue. Oh my gosh, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. I'm going to lose my account, blah, blah, blah. No, care 10% more, approach it correctly. You're going to be fine.
That's why you got to treat it as a business from day one.
Yes.
Right. Or a company, like you like to say, right? You need to be professional.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And being professional is caring about all the things that don't matter. Right. And I'm going to give you a literal example. Now, this is not something that doesn't matter, but how in 2026, I just naturally have now a competitive advantage that I never thought I would is when I started this, my Amazon side hustle, when I was still at my 9 to 5, right? I treated it as a company from day one. I tracked every single data I could, right? So every single ASIN I've purchased from which website with the order number, how much I paid. And that's mundane, man. Let me tell you, I don't know how many lines I have in my spreadsheet. Now it's my VA that take care of it, but I don't know how many lines that I have on that spreadsheet. But now, like, going into 2026 with AI taking more and more leaps forward, whether it's LLMs or OpenClaw or whatever it is, I'm now able to take that data, right, that I cared about back then. Now, someone might have told me, why the heck are you tracking everything? And at first, to be honest, it was just insecurity about getting audited. I was like, if I get audited, you know, like I have so many ASINs and such. But now today, because I cared back then so much and I thought about it every single day up until today, all of a sudden, I now have a competitive advantage that I can feed all this data to AI and it can help me. So like doing all those things, you don't even realize how much like carrying 10%, 20% compounds. And
Yeah.
that can also just be like stated as in the early time when you're selling and you're starting up. It's easy. You have your 9 to 5, you have your family, you have your this, your that. If you just think about Amazon every day, really
Yeah.
like act and like look
Actually.
and want to actually do it, you're gonna succeed. And like when things are rough, you still just put one foot in front of the other, but you're still looking, you're still taking care of
Yeah. Yeah.
IP complaints and inauthentic complaints and all these things, and you just tag them. And then all of a sudden, you wake up 2.5 years later, and you're like, man, I'm ungated in all these products naturally. Maybe it's because I just didn't stop. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
That's
100%, dude.
really awesome, man. I'm listen, it was a super great talking to you. I'm scared I'm about to go down a whole other rabbit hole of AI and we can go for another 2 hours. So
Yeah,
I'll
man.
re-invite you. I'm sure
Yeah.
the people watching had a great time. I know I learned a ton. So I can just imagine the new seller. Guys, if you guys want a repricer, if you guys are not sure about a repricer, trust me. That's all I can say. Please go and look at Aura. He has a 14-day free trial, no
14
credit
day.
card
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah.
Be proactive, guys. Again, we're looking at this as a business. Be proactive. Reach out, get help setting it up. Don't be that person that just signs up, doesn't get an onboarding, and then complains when it doesn't work. All right. So, Dillon, I'll let you like just give that little ending note. But
Yeah.
please, guys, take it from me. Please, if you're going to look at a repricer, you can go look in the description or pin in the comments. I have a link there for you. Go check out Aura. He mentioned it before. Some sellers just was selling like 20, 30K. If you're set up right, it can easily boost your sales. So Dillon, finish us off.
Yeah. If you've been on the fence, if you're using something that you're not super comfortable in, I would invite you to give us a try. We're not salesy. We're not going to pressure you on anything. Our team's also proactive. So if you don't reach out to us to schedule an onboarding session, promise you'll get an email from us to offer to do it. We want to be involved. We want to assist. Now is the best time to get this up and running with how things are going to go in 2026. You do not want to be operating this business without a repricing software that can raise prices, that can have your back, and that can actually get you to where you want to get to.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.